Hello everybody, it's TannerFishies here, back again with a new video here on the channel, and this video is going to be a little bit different because we're not going to be talking about specifically Ninjago-oriented subjects. Now, my history with Ninjago is long-standing. I've been here since day one, obviously you guys would know that. I've been watching the show since the pilots, and I have very fond memories of Ninjago all the way back to 2011. I still very much love Ninjago to this day, and no, this video does not mean that I'm quitting making Ninjago content. However, I do want to take this opportunity to discuss one of my favorite childhood shows that isn't Ninjago. So going back to Ninjago started when I was around 10 or 11, really late into my childhood, almost to my early teens, and most of my Ninjago exposure, or at least some of my fondest memories, do indeed come from my early teens. And obviously before Ninjago, there were several shows that I was into, mainly a lot of stuff that came out on Cartoon Network at the time. I was very much into those types of shows, but there was a show that came out long before any of those, long before I was even born, that I ended up getting hooked on and watching religiously over the course of my childhood, and that show is called Beast Wars Transformers. Now this video, like I said, will not be about Ninjago from here on out, so if you don't want to hear my thoughts on something else for a change, you might want to check out a different video. We will be back to normal Ninjago content tomorrow. For those of you guys that are still here, let's talk about Beast Wars and let me explain why I love it so much. Also, there will be spoilers ahead, spoilers for a show that's been out for 25 years, but I figured I would just give you guys that spoiler warning regardless. Let's go ahead and get into it. So Beast Wars, I was able to rewatch it recently because of the DVD set that I have, and it's currently the 25th anniversary of the show. It came out in 1996, and yeah, this show is quite old. It actually did not come out during my childhood, and like I said earlier, I wasn't even born yet. But I did watch it during my childhood thanks to the first Transformers movie. Now, even though I don't really like those movies all that much, I do have to admit that the first Transformers movie, the first live-action one at least, definitely triggered my excitement for the Transformers brand and got me into the series as a whole. And as a kid, Transformers was pretty much my favorite thing ever. Around the time that the first movie came out, I wanted to go ahead and watch everything Transformers related that I could find. Luckily, my local library had a bunch of stuff, including the 1986 Transformers movie, which is still one of my favorite films of all time, and a couple of other DVDs of various Transformers series, including Beast Wars. And like I said, I watched those DVDs and I was instantly hooked. Beast Wars has since become one of my favorite Transformers series ever, and one of my favorite TV shows of all time. The series came out in 1996 and followed a group of Transformers, the descendants of the Autobots, called the Maximals, and they were fighting another group of Transformers descended from the Decepticons called the Predacons. This is kind of a sequel to G1 of sorts. It's very much in continuity with the original 1984 cartoon, and as such, everything in that continuity pretty much connects to Beast Wars. The show had standout characters, standout performances, several vets on this show, including some that actually went on to work on shows like Ninjago, for example. Dinobot was one of my favorite characters from Beast Wars, and his voice actor, Scott McNeil, also happens to voice the Overlord and several other characters from Ninjago's lore, so I think that's kind of cool. It's kind of like a spiritual connection in a way between Beast Wars and Ninjago. Like I said, the show was very much rich with lore and character development, and that's in no part thanks to the small cast of characters. The only issue that Beast Wars faced during its run, and even now it gets a lot of heat for this, is the animation. It's kind of rough by today's standards, like I said. Some of the animation looks a little wonky, some of the art direction, if you want to call it that, looks a little strange compared to modern day shows, but believe it or not, this was actually one of the first shows to incorporate CGI animation into its budget. Like I said, this came out in 1996, and this did indeed pave the way for future CGI shows like Ninjago, for example. Also, the show is surprisingly dark and mature for a kid's show. Multiple characters die throughout the duration of the show, and they do tackle some pretty heavy adult themes that we'll get into later on in this video, but I was very much impressed as a kid by just how mature and adult a Transformers series could be, especially one like this. I figured I would go through each season. There are 3 seasons of the show, and like I said, I recently binged every single episode of this series, so I want to go ahead and tackle what I enjoyed about each particular season before we get into some other specifics that I enjoyed about the show. For Season 1 consisted of 26 episodes and basically featured the Maximals and the Predacons crash landing on prehistoric Earth after going back in time, and they all decide to adopt animal forms instead of the traditional Transformer alternate modes because, again, they're in prehistoric Earth. There are no vehicles, so they're going to have to be animals. The Maximals battle the Predacons for Energon, which is basically the Transformers equivalent of fuel, and basically in Season 1, random stuff kind of happens each episode. It is kind of filler-esque, I suppose, at least according to today's skewed definition of filler, but there are subtle nods to future events, such as the aliens that appear very frequently throughout the series. They do kind of lay their traps in the first season, and we kind of see glimpses of them. These aliens are against both sides, and they kind of don't align with either position, obviously, and it goes on to create create a very interesting conflict, at least during seasons 2 and 3. Like I said, season 1 just kind of lays the groundwork for them, and season 2 and 3 just bumps it up entirely. There's also these little things called stasis pods, which feature pretty much blank transformers. They happen to crash on the planet every now and then, and it's just an excuse for the show to introduce new characters, some of which went on to be fan favorite characters, and others just get kind of bumped into obscurity, never really talked about among the fan base. Season 2 is where we actually get some more continuity. Seasons 2 and 3 had 13 episodes each, so combining the two of them to create a 26 episode season is pretty much common practice among the Transformers community. However, with season 2, we strictly have 13 episodes, and like I said, the storylines are more streamlined, there's more of a grasp on continuity, and season 2 basically begins with a huge alien quantum surge that engulfs the entirety of prehistoric Earth. This in turn upgrades several of our established characters, and others leave throughout the season, new characters join. History really starts to be brought into question here, and the season ends with history more or less being destroyed as Megatron kills the original Optimus Prime, thus the Maximals don't really exist anymore. Like I said, the Maximals are descendants of the Autobots, so you can kind of see how killing one of the original Autobots would kind of mess with the time stream a little bit. Season 3 kind of continues this storyline. Optimus Primal, the leader of the Maximals, takes in the original Optimus Prime's spark and pretty much upgrades himself. History is restored, then erased again, and the entire season kind of bounces back and forth, playing with the ideas of perhaps we should destroy the timeline, maybe we should keep the timeline, what exactly is going on here. Like I said, it very much picks up where Season 2 left off. We also get introduced to a few more characters. The Maximals try to defend the timeline, and Megatron is consistently dealing with his lack of power. He ultimately ends up making a couple of decisions that allows himself to be upgraded, even though it might skew the timeline just a little bit. And of course, the actual series itself ends with several more character deaths, and Megatron is finally defeated as the series comes to a close. But of course, the storyline would not stop there. The series actually did have a sequel series that continued the events from Beast Wars, but it's not as good and it's not as well received by the fan base. I personally don't enjoy it all that much, but it is still very dark. It does keep that mature theme of the original Beast Wars, but like I said, we don't really need to talk about it here. Overall, Beast Wars, like I said, is a very enjoyable experience, and now I want to get into some of my favorite characters. Like I said, most of the characters are pretty well written, very fantastically developed throughout this entire series, but there are some in particular that I do want to take this opportunity to discuss and talk about. One of my all-time favorite characters from Beast Wars was Dinobot. For example, he does indeed contemplate suicide at one point, which is obviously very mature for a kids program, but he ultimately does sacrifice himself to save history, but Megatron manages to clone him later into a mindless zombie, but the original Dinobot does kind of return in a way to possess that clone and ends up saving the day towards the conclusion of the series. Overall, Dinobot is a fantastic character, very deep and very well written. Another character that I enjoy is Tigatron, who does indeed have the alternate mode of a tiger, and I was always kind of fond of this character. He was very wise, he was very peace-loving, he was very earth-loving, he prefers to be among nature, eventually getting abducted by aliens and fused with his girlfriend into a godlike being, and if that sounds weird, it's because it is. Tigatron in the series has a very weird fate, but for the time that he was around, he was actually pretty cool, and I liked him quite a bit. Optimus Primal is the leader of the Maximals, and he dies a lot like all Optimus Primes/Primals do, and he switches bodies a lot too. He's very heroic but very stern, very much like a parent to all of the other Maximals. He's still extremely cool though, and he has an excellent voice performance brought to us by Gary Chalk, one of my all-time favorite voice actors. We also have Megatron, the leader of the Predacons, who's not the original Megatron, but he kind of borrows his name in a way. He's the leader of the Predacons, and he's very, very crazy, very psychotic, and I have to admit, Megatron has kind of the best voice performance in the entirety of Beast Wars, brought to us by David Kaye. Megatron's voice will be forever iconic. He's also very much obsessed with changing history so the Decepticons will win the war, but he ultimately fails, but he does indeed get a lot of upgrades like I said, and his final form, the Red Dragon, is one of my favorite forms of Megatron throughout the entirety of the show. Other characters that I enjoyed include Black Arachnia, Rat Trap, Waspinator, Tarantulas, and Depth Charge. I have very fond memories of all of those characters, and rewatching the series definitely increased my love for most of these characters. In terms of other things that I can talk about regarding the series, the music is fantastic. The show is scored extremely well, especially the opening. Obviously, the intro sequence to Beast Wars gets longer as the series goes on. I believe it starts out being 30 seconds, and then seasons 2 and 3 are both a minute long, but the intros are very iconic and very very fun to watch. I never really skipped any of the intros watching the series again, and I kind of prefer the longer intros of seasons 2 and 3. I think those are a lot more dynamic and a lot more fun. The music for this show is just phenomenal. In terms of bad things about this show, or things that I really don't like about it, like I said, the animation isn't the best, and we kind of talked about this already in this video, but the show was on a very tight budget, and the show ended up blowing a lot of the budget on designing the characters and hiring voice actors. As a result, a lot of the backgrounds most of the time look very sparse and very empty, but the animation does improve in seasons 2 and 3. Season 1 is a little rough right off the bat when you just start watching it, but like I said, eventually as the series goes on, the animation improves more and more. There's also a couple of inconsistencies to the story, which I thoroughly don't appreciate all that much. Certain relics kind of appear out of nowhere without explanation, and not every character is as well-rounded as I would have hoped they would be, but ultimately the series itself does contain very strong writing. There's only a couple of issues with the writing that I can point out. Overall, Beast Wars is a fantastic series even still today. I would argue that it holds up to today's standards for the most part, especially in terms of storytelling, writing, music, and character design. Some of the animation leaves a little bit to be desired, but overall the show would look awesome by today's standards, and I would very much love to see a restored version of Beast Wars at some point in time. Beast Wars is part of the reason why I'm still a very big Transformers fan today, as most of the Transformers movies kind of, don't do all that well and aren't all that great. There are still some very solid Transformers shows out there, and Beast Wars is pretty much the best one in my opinion. I thoroughly enjoy this series, and it was quite a treat to rewatch it. I've kind of been on a Beast Wars high as of late. I've been collecting some of the Kingdom figures that have come out so far, and those have been pretty cool too. They might be a little pricey, but hey, I do have some of them, so whatever. I even have the Masterpiece Optimus Primal. I had the intention to get more Masterpiece Beast Wars figures, but they're kind of out of my budget. But regardless, my tiny Beast Wars collection still brings warmth to my heart, and like I said, it was very much a treat to revisit this series, and in terms of if I would recommend it to you guys, I would recommend checking it out. If you found anything that I said in this video interesting, I would recommend giving the series a watch. You can find it all online pretty easily if you don't have the DVD set like I do. I know websites like Dailymotion actually have the entire series on there, and I would argue that you don't even have to be a Transformers fan to appreciate this show. This series is very solid in a lot of ways. It's easily one of my favorite TV shows of all time, one of my favorite animated shows ever, and I would highly recommend checking it out to any fans of animation or just good storytelling in general. This series is that good, and like I said, you don't even have to be a Transformers fan to appreciate it, so I would recommend checking out Beast Wars because it was quite a treat to revisit, and it's one of my favorite shows of all time. Can't really recommend it enough. So thanks a lot for checking out this video, you guys. I know this video is kind of convoluted, maybe a little long, maybe a little hard to follow, but I just kind of wanted to gush about this show a little bit because it was indeed my favorite childhood show. Even though the show did not come out during my childhood, it was still a very big part of my childhood. And of course, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know down below in the comments if I convinced you to watch this show or not. And for those of you guys that have actually seen it, let me know what you think about the show. What are your favorite characters? What are your favorite arcs in the series? Leave all your thoughts down below, you guys. And like I said, thank you very much for putting up with a video that's not explicitly Ninjago related. Tomorrow we will return to your regularly scheduled Ninjago content, and in the meantime, you guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and check out the links down below in the description for my other forms of social media. As always, big shout out goes out to my Patreon supporters, including once again the marvelous Jan. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video once again. My name is TannerFishies, and with that I bid you farewell.